Hello everyone, the purpose of this video is to sort of introduce you to the draft strategic plan for EDI at NSLA and to give you an opportunity to be able to make some comments and then to fill in some gaps, a couple of small gaps that still exist. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to go through where we are right now, and then hopefully we could get some responses from you in the next little while with regards to what do you think is missing with the draft plan. So just to go here, let me advance my screen. Sorry, I went too fast. So essentially, once the plan is fully written, currently right now I'm using sort of a PowerPoint sort of framework, but I will sort of convert that to an 8.5 by 11 portrait document, Acrobat, a PDF document. Or we could probably leave it like that. But anyway, I'll decide that a bit later. So really the plan will have an executive summary, a vision statement, a mission statement, some beliefs and values, a balanced scorecard framework on which we will actually build the various goals and objectives and initiatives, the desired results, and the term desired results really is another word for objectives, and the initiatives to achieve the desired results. The last part that's not actually shown here is really just about some guidance on implementing the strategic plan. We cannot make the assumption that just because we have a plan that it will be implemented. So we usually have to provide some guidance on how you actually approach the implementation stage, because that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where you actually begin to face challenges around resources, getting money to invest in the plan, getting people to have the time to get certain things done, bringing people together to consult them, to get feedback, etc. So implementation can often be a bit daunting, a bit challenging, and so we want to provide some guidelines on that. The approach that we're using, typically when you develop a strategic plan, you bring together a strategic planning committee, you have a 2 or 3 day retreat, and so on. In this particular situation, what we have is that it's difficult to get many of you together because of your busy schedules and your workloads and so on. And so we've sort of looked at a lot of the information we gathered from the various surveys. We did surveys of employees, we did surveys of clients, we did surveys of the board members and stakeholders. And so using all that information, and also we actually took a look at what other institutions across the country are doing, we found out that there's really not a whole lot that is happening with respect to DEI in various legal aid organizations across the country. But looking at that, plus looking at desk literature and your own documents, we were able to pull together a skeletal framework that you will respond to. So a potential mission for you, and then you could tweak that mission statement, would be as follows. Sorry. NSLA's mission is to create an organization that leverages diversity, equity, and inclusion as a source of enrichment and strength. NSLA will foster an environment that enables success for people from all walks of life while sharing common fundamental values that are grounded in justice, civility, and respect. So that could be a mission. You could decide if you want to modify that. And so I'm inviting you now to provide some comments on that mission statement. You could just simply, in a PowerPoint document, you could sort of identify, there's a part there in the menu where you can insert a comment, and you simply add some comments to that. A potential vision statement, think of it as the ultimate prize. What is it that you want to achieve? What is it that you want to be known for? What is your legacy if you pursue that mission? NSLA aspires to be a model, collaborative, inclusive, and caring organization that reflects diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything we do, thereby making us a great place to work and grow. So through creating a culture of inclusion, valuing diversity, and then of course practicing equity, that then makes the place a model and then also a wonderful place to work. So that's a vision statement that could be considered. Of course, we could have an alternative to that, or several alternatives to that if you wish. But that's one that is being suggested based on all the information. Now, we need some values and guiding principles, and I will sort of wait for your feedback on that. Right now, I sort of introduced one, which is diversity. We value diversity, but you could say, what else do we value? We value respect for each other. We could say that we value or we appreciate belonging. We value human rights. I mean, you could come up with a set of different values, or that you subscribe to certain principles, right? The principle that each and every single person has something valuable to offer, and that it is the organization's responsibility to create the conditions for that person to be able to make that offering in the best possible manner. So, I mean, that could be a principle that each and every one has something to offer. So I'm going to allow you to, I should say, use this space to put in some of your ideas. So add a value or a principle and then expand on it. A value or principle, expand on it. A value or principle and expand on it. Much like I've done here. Diversity. We value diversity in race, gender, class, physical ability, sexual orientation as sources of inspiration, innovation, and growth. We believe that our diversity must reflect our country, our province, and our communities, and that while negotiating space for all can be messy, in the end we forge a better state of humanity. That could be a core principle or value that you hold. All right? Good. So the balanced scorecard framework, in case you've not heard of a balanced scorecard model is quite popular in strategic planning, in not-for-profits and for-profit organizations. The sort of classic balanced scorecard has 4 parts to it, and the 4 parts usually have a financial perspective. It has what we call a customer perspective, a internal operations perspective, and what we call a learning and growth or intangible asset perspective. I didn't feel that, or we didn't feel that would fit perfectly with what we're trying to do, since we're not trying to develop a strategic framework for the entire organization at the corporate level, but rather for diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organization, right? And so we came up with 4 different perspectives. One is that the intent is to deliver better client value or client and stakeholder value. Is one dimension. Another dimension is really the climate and the physical workspace, within the organization. Another one we felt was important in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion is leadership and governance, because one has to lead the initiatives, one has to champion the initiatives, and that governance around policies, procedures, and the expectations of the board or the board of commissioners is important in that regard. So what kind of leadership and governance does the organization have that is supportive of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then, of course, workforce capacity and competence, which has to do with not capacity in terms of physical numbers, the ability to have, or I should say the capacity to deliver service to diverse communities and diverse clients, but also the competence to deliver that as well. And so those 4 dimensions we felt, when we analyzed the surveys and the literature, we felt that those 4 would capture the areas in which the organization would want to take action in order to really improve diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace, right? So we want to look at what it's doing in terms of delivering better value to clients and stakeholders and how to engage with stakeholders. We want to look at the physical workspace, but also the sort of climate and culture of the place. Would also want to look at leadership practice and governance, because ultimately the leadership and the governance will determine what gets done, and then of course the capacity, whether or not we have the organization has the skills and capacity to deliver what it's supposed to deliver, right? So those four areas will make up the balance scorecard framework for DEI or DEI. I'm just going to just say DEI from now on. So what we call key result areas, if I go back, is really those four dimensions right here. These are areas where we want to achieve specific results. We want to achieve results in terms of client value. We want to achieve results in terms of climate and physical workspace. We want to do some things and achieve some improvements there. Leadership and governance, we want to do some things there and achieve, and so forth. So we refer to these four areas or four dimensions as key result areas. I'm just going to hydrate. Under each of these key result areas now, there are sub-dimensions or specific things that you want to achieve that really supports that area. So when we talk about delivering greater client and stakeholder value, some things we may want to focus on in that context might have to do with increasing accessibility and opportunity to have service provided by NSLA for clients. So accessibility to the institution is one thing. And I'm not talking about physical accessibility, but if I would like to have service provided by NSLA, can I reach them easily? Or is it really a real burden to really access services with the institution? So we talk about accessibility and opportunity. Also engagement and outreach, that there's a need to deliver greater client value. NSLA will have to have engagement with BIPOC communities, right? And have some initiatives that center on enhancing outreach to those communities. And then of course its service has to be inclusive, in the sense that inclusive and holistic. So the idea that no one should feel excluded based on the sort of service practices of the organization. So that also ties in, of course, with the accessibility piece as well. So under client value and stakeholder value, we would like to improve accessibility, enhance engagement and outreach, and then, of course, strengthen the inclusivity of the service delivery. That actually came out of the analysis of the surveys and comments that people made. So it's not just from the sky. We actually distilled that from the various survey reports we got. In our analysis of the survey reports, we were able to identify that there are several potential priorities that are linked to client and stakeholder value, such as strengthening collaboration, enhancing the diversity of the legal and support staff, improving access to services in rural areas, so you see where the accessibility comes from, focus on more practical real-world applications on racial justice and so on. So thinking about expansion and inclusion in terms of your service model, your service delivery, so that it's more inclusive of other issues that might be faced by potential BIPOC clients, right? So that was distilled from the survey. Now, a number of possible actions were suggested. We've actually taken on board a number of those. I've left this page blank in the plan in case when you review the actions that are currently being considered, that you could actually put some of your ideas down on this particular page. So as you can see, this is what the template of how we articulate the results or the objectives, if you wish, that we're trying to achieve. And then, since we're sort of positioning this as a 3-year plan, that we will say in 2021 here's what we would like to do, in 2022 here's what we would like to do, in 2023. So these are the specific actions or the initiatives that will be undertaken by NSLA. And those were, some of them, well, most of them came from recommendations from the surveys, but also in some cases where there were no activities or no initiatives that were suggested, we use our own knowledge of diversity, equity, and inclusion, plus the literature, to come up with some initiatives that we felt would align with NSLA and make sense for the organization. So if we look at the template, the way it's set up is that we identify under each of the key result areas what are specific results we want to achieve, or the sort of the objectives, if you wish, and then what benchmarks will be used for excellence. In other words, how will we know that we've achieved that result? What benchmark we want to set, or what target or what indicator we want to set. And then, of course, in the 3 years coming, what is it that we would like to do? Over here, in terms of identifying internal champions, or if you need some partners, external partners and allies, you could identify them here along with, consistent with the initiatives that you want to implement. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them. I'm not going to go through each one of them. I will leave that for you to read. But for example, enhance ease of access to NSLA services for diverse clients. That would be one of the things that you like to achieve as an objective or as a result. And we could say, how are we going to know if we're doing well? So an indicator is client rating of ease of access to services, to NSLA services. So we could actually ask clients or the organization could ask its clients, how easy was it to access our services on a scale of 1 to 10, right? So you would like to have at least 75% of your clients stating that it is relatively easy to access services at NSLA. Now you could change that. This is just an initial value that we've put in place, saying that it would be good to target 75% of your clients saying it's relatively easy to target to access services, right? And then what are some specific initiatives that we would want to take on? Well, you could see here in the first year, which is 2021, collect information on the ease of access to NSLA's current services and make recommendations to improve that where needed. So that could be done this year, where some kind of study of that issue takes place. Someone is going to have to do that. Who's going to be the internal champion? Is it going to be the CEO? Is it going to be the HR manager? Is it going to be, depending on what your organizational structure is, you're going to have to identify the right person to do that. Okay, so 2022, you will explore establishing on-site clinics in shelters to improve access to services, particularly in shelters with high potential case opportunities. You may have multiple shelters, but if there's not a lot of case opportunities, then you wouldn't want to necessarily invest in an on-site clinic. But at the same time, if the potential demand is going to be high, then you may want to consider that for different locations, right? And of course, that would tend to be based on where the locus of the various populations are. Where do you find African Nova Scotians? Where do you find, indigenous persons, and so forth? All right. So if we continue, we see strengthen the inclusivity of service delivery, percentage of annual service requests from potential clients not met by NSLA. So if your service is not inclusive or not expansive, then chances are people will be requesting services that you cannot provide. We want to minimize that situation. In other words, we want to have the sort of service scope of NSLA sufficiently large to be able to meet most of the needs of those clients. So right now we're saying under 5% of requests for service could be a good benchmark. But again, that's up to you to sort of decide where you want to go with that. All right. And then the third one is enhance outreach to and engagement with diverse communities and stakeholder organizations. And we have 3 actions there, one for 2021, 22, 23. Now, it is not necessary to have them all spread out. You could have 2 actions all taking place in 2021, or 2 actions that will take place in 2022, because you're completing something that is taking place as we speak in 2021, and you want to delay implementation of an initiative a little bit later. Or an initiative could be sufficiently long term that you won't actually even get to it until the 3rd year, year 3. So it all depends on the kinds of initiatives. All right. So the next one is on improving climate and physical workplace. We talk about inclusion and belonging as part of climate, for example, aesthetics about the workplace itself, and physical accessibility, given that one of the equity-seeking subgroups is really people with physical disabilities. So we have to make sure that the workplace and the climate will accommodate their needs. And then, of course, potential priorities that came out of the data analysis, you will see here. And I've left a blank space for you to put some of your ideas on what kinds of initiatives will actually support some of these priorities. And I should mention as well that there were some that were already identified, but we already took them on board, and as you could see that they actually are placed here. So those initiatives right here. In 2021, we will do this. In 2022, 2023. And then we have, so for this example, enhanced culture of inclusion and belonging for diverse groups, or we can say for BIPOCs. And then percentage of employees rating a strong sense of inclusion and belonging, or they're rating NSLA as having a strong sense of inclusion and belonging, at least 75%. And these are actions that will be taken. We need to identify champions for each action and the respective partners and alliances, or allies, if necessary. And then this continues for climate and workplace. Then we look at enhancing institutional leadership and governance. And then under that, the desired results would be, or the sub-dimensions would be, the leadership and governance composition. So the makeup of your internal management team at NSLA, but also the makeup of the board of commissioners. Or I should say, the commissioners. So we want to make sure that they're diverse and it's reflective of the client base that the organization serves. Policies and procedures are part of your governance structure. So we want to make sure that we have relevant policies and procedures that are effective. And then, of course, we're going to need resources. So that's kind of where finance and then human asset capital would be required. And then compliance and accountability. No point in having policies and procedures if we don't also work on enhancing compliance. So compliance with legislation where necessary, and also compliance with internal policies and procedures. Again, we identified from the surveys what potential priorities would be, and I've left some space for you to jot down some of your ideas. And we do have a couple of initiatives that we've identified. So for example, on the composition side, we had conduct a review of the commissions, and that should be apostrophe S, recruitment process to ensure equity and access to opportunities for potential BIPOC commissioners. Establish a practice of consulting with leaders of racialized and other underrepresented groups and communities in its recruitment of commission directors. So 2 actions that can be taken. It probably could all be taken in 2021, or you might want to defer it. It all depends on where the commission is right now in terms of their workflow and their work plan. And then we see the other results that we want to achieve, such as strengthening the policy support for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, leadership and governance, improving resources, and then enhancing compliance and accountability. And so we have actions taken here. Again, if you find that you have some great ideas in terms of what can be done, to achieve these results, please feel free to put them down. And that's where I left that space here. Possible actions for enhancing leadership and governance. So I'm expecting that the members of the planning committee and strategic planning committee or the diversity, equity, and inclusion group within NSLA would take some time to think through the initiatives that are here, see if they are viable enough, but also add its own voice, additional voice, because a lot of the recommendations did come from the employees within the organization. All right. And last but not least, the fourth dimension is about the workplace. And we also have 4 sub-dimensions into that. We want to look at the employee composition and retention, skills and competencies, promotion and opportunity, and career development. So these are 4 aspects that we thought about that would be useful in the context of DEI. And we also have some priorities that relates to the workforce, enhancing career development, providing equal opportunity for BIPOC staff, to BIPOC staff for promotion. So we're concerned about promotion, we're concerned about opportunities of career development and so forth. Possible initiatives, actually those have been taken on board already. I'm going to remove that. So when you actually see the document, you're not going to see this. And because a number of them have already been taken on board, if you look. So here I've left a space for you to add some of your ideas. And if you look at this template right here, you'll see that we have a number of initiatives that we've already identified. A number of those came from the surveys. So enhancing the diversity of employee composition, and so these are some actions that can be taken in 2021, 2022, 2023. You will have the flexibility to be able to change that, because you know better than we do the sort of institutional workload that will either prevent you from doing this the way you would like to do it. So taking that into consideration, you could certainly adjust the schedule for achieving these various initiatives right here. Okay. Now, so basically up until here, that was the last slide. As I mentioned earlier, we will have to kind of identify a champion for each initiative, and that's crucial for implementation, and then who your partners and allies would be, if necessary, for a particular initiative. It's good to identify those up front. Finally, implementing the DEI strategic plan. There'll be a little bit of expansion of each of these subheadings on the critical success factors. What are the factors that must be in place to ensure that the plan succeed? What basic investments and resources would be needed to be able to support the plan? Of course, money is always one of them, but also employee time. You can't, sometimes if employees are already fully scheduled, you cannot then say, in addition to what you're doing, hey, I need you to go run and develop this initiative and implement it. So you're going to have to create some space for them to be able to do that. Identification of champions. So who will actually champion each of these initiatives in the plan? That's very crucial, because with no champions, nothing gets done. So we're hoping that NSLA will be able to identify champions for this. Prioritization of initiatives for implementation. So we have a whole list of initiatives, but not all of them are equally important. So how do we prioritize them? If you could only do one thing this year, what would it be? And that's what prioritization is about, is you now looking at these different initiatives and saying, which will give you more bang for your buck? Which one will create more value for the organization? What things can we afford not to ignore? We cannot afford to ignore, sorry. Right? So that's prioritization. And integrating the strategic plan to daily work, the idea of, well, can you add more work to what people are doing? And if the answer is no, then you have to then say, how do you reallocate some of the duties that some people are currently undertaking so that you can provide them with the time to implement these initiatives. And then, of course, you will need to know if your plan is working. You know if your plan is working by having a monitoring system, monitoring and evaluation system. So the monitoring system will look at the KPIs that you have and collect data and see if you're trending towards the targets that you set for yourself. All right? And then, of course, evaluating the plan to determine if it's actually delivering what it's supposed to deliver. And if not, you do what we call course correction. If it is achieving, then kudos, celebrate their successes and so on. All right. So that is the end of the presentation. Hopefully that gives you sufficient sense of where we are with the plan and what you need to do in the next 2 to 3 days to provide any particular input that you would like to before we could finalize a plan and write up the final report for submission. Okay? If you have any questions, send me an email or send us an email at harvey, harvi.millar, millar, @gmail.com. That would be great. Or you could just simply ask Alicia for our email address, Alicia or Megan, and you could get that information. Thank you.